Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Rama
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare. Hare Krishna, we welcome you all for Gita Mastery Course Trimester 5, Session 5. And you all have been showing how consistent you are in the classes. We have reached to chapter 14, starting from 1 to 14. It has been a long journey. And you have been showing the signs of mode of goodness because that's how consistently you are coming back for the classes. So here we have the chapter completely dedicated to modes of material nature. And before we begin that, let's chant Mangalacharan.
Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamsha Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimade Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyatya Deshatarine Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yatkripa tamaham vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Paramanand Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram.
Hare Krishna. So last time we were on chapter number 14. We have completed till verse number 18. And today we are getting into the fourth section of chapter 14, Transcending the modes. So we have discussed what are these three modes, how these modes bind one to this material world. We also realize that how there is a constant competition between goodness, passion, and ignorance. So there is a constant mode of supremacy that one dominates at some time and the other dominates at the other time. In the next section, we also saw about acting. So how a person acts under the influence of these three modes. So how he acts in goodness, in passion, and in ignorance. And we discussed that dying in a particular mode and what is the outcome, where the soul goes if that soul leaves the body in the mode of goodness, in passion, and in ignorance. So after understanding all this, we also come to know that mode of goodness is not good enough. Why? Because it still keeps us tied to this material world. So even if we are in the mode of goodness, we are still bound by the shackles. We are still here. So now the next section, my dear devotees, it's a very important and interesting section where we are going to discuss about how can one transcend these modes, how can one get out of the cycle of repeated birth and death, and how can one just set himself free from the clutches of these three modes. Nanyam gunebhyah kartaram yada drishtanupashyati gunebhyascha param vetti madbhavam sodigacchati.
When one properly sees that in all activities no other performer is at work than these modes of nature, and he knows the Supreme Lord, who is transcendental to all these modes. He attains my spiritual nature. Mad bhavam sodhi gacchati. So, what is the process? This is the section where we see that how one can transcend the modes. So, Krishna is talking about two things. One, this person can properly see. And what does he see? He sees that there is no one else working in this material world. It is the modes which are working. And he understands that the Lord is beyond these three modes of Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamogun. When one understands these two things, he transcends the modes and attains the spiritual nature of the Supreme Lord. So this is the knowledge which awards one liberation. Like we have Filmfare Award, Grammy Award. So this is how we are awarded liberation if we have this information. What is it? When we observe any activity in this material world, what do we understand? There are three things: the body, which is acting, the action that the body is performing, and the object with which it is interacting, or the goal, which it is trying to achieve. So we see that everything, the body is made up of material nature, which is governed by the modes. The action is also guided by the modes. We see that somebody who's in Sattva Gun, he acts in a particular way. Somebody who's in Tamagun, he acts in the opposite way. And because these actions are governed by the modes, so are the goals that are achieved by those actions. So, this person who can observe this in the material world, and he sees that everything is actually only governed by the modes, such a person understands that I am separate from this material body, and the Supreme Lord is also separate from this. He is beyond the material modes. Then he is a fit candidate to attain liberation.
गुणानेतान् अतीत्यात्रीन्
देहि देहा समुद्भवान् जन्म मृत्यु जरा दुःखैर्विमुक्तोऽमृतमश्नुते.
When the embodied being is able to transcend these three modes associated with the material body, he can become free from birth, death, old age, and their distress, and can enjoy nectar even in this life. So here this word dehi, if you see the word dehi is underlined. So dehi means when one has a deh or a body, or when is embodied. So even at this time, when we are actually living in the body, which is actually controlled by the mode, but if we understand this knowledge, which knowledge? The previous verse. So if we understand that how my body is awarded to me because of the modes, my actions, what I'm performing, it is not actually I who's acting, but the modes are getting me to act in a certain way or respond in a certain way, and that how I am different from the body and I am different from these modes. So when a person understands this, then even if when a person is still living in the body, what happens to him? Janma mrityu jara. So janma mrityu jara means birth, death, and old age. So the distress, dukkha, so the dukkha, what comes out of birth, death, and old age is not felt anymore. This person becomes free from that because this person understands now that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, and I'm not the modes. So I am a spirit soul, part and parcel of Krishna. So when he starts living his life from that principle, then he can enjoy the nectar even in this life. So here is the first life lesson. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness is the sign of liberation from material entanglement, even while being in this body. So even if a person is in this body and still he feels happiness, constant happiness. Why? Because he understands that he is not the body.
And also one can see that the what do the devotees do? The devotees are engaged in Krishna service. They chant the holy names. They their mind is absorbed in the Lord. Their body is engaged in the service of the Lord, and these are the same activities in the spiritual world. So even if they are in the material world, but all their activities are as if in the spiritual world. So even while being in the material world, in this body, they are actually liberated from the material entanglement.
Actually, this particular life lesson, it reminds me of one of the senior most devotee in iskcon as such. His name is, his full name is Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. So recently in one of his lecture, he was telling, so this particular personality, he had a stroke and he is physically handicapped. So
Brain stroke.
he had a brain stroke and he is physically in a very challenging position where even for eating he needs help. But he gives classes, he travels all over the world on the wheelchair, assisted by a team of 4 5 devotees who actually carry him, make him lie down, feed him, everything. He's dependent on somebody else. And yet he is uncompromising in his spirit of preaching. So, very recently, I guess 10 days back, in one of the lectures, Maharaj was speaking. He made this point that physically I am handicapped and spiritually I am very happy. So physically, though he is handicapped, but he is not feeling the miseries. So this is what it is mentioned here, that when we understand that we are not the body, so okay, I have a crippled body, I have a handicapped body, I have some problems, I have some mental problems, I have stress, but I am not the stress. I am not the mind, I am not the body. So this particular person who's mentioned here, he is performing devotional service in Krishna consciousness. So though living in this body, he is free from the miseries. अर्जुनुवाच कैर्लिङ्गैस्त्रीणगुणानेतान् अतीतो भवति प्रभो किमाचारः कथं चैतांस् त्रीन् गुणान् अतिवर्तते.
Arjuna inquired, O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior? And how does he transcend the modes of nature? So, by hearing all of this, Arjuna becomes very, very intrigued. Again, all these questions come to fore. That amazing, huh? I mean, because everything in this material world is governed by the modes. But you are saying that there are people who transcend the modes. Who are they? What are their symptoms? So, symptoms mean that this person is not just speaking the knowledge, but he's living that knowledge. These the symptoms are manifest in his behavior and in his lifestyle. What are those symptoms of a person who's beyond the modes of material nature? What is his behavior? And then he asked a very important question: how does this happen? How does he transcend the modes of material nature? So if you remember, second chapter also, Arjuna asked these questions about sthita pragya. And he asked similar questions: how does he sit? How does he walk? How does he talk? All these questions he asked. And here in this particular section, Arjuna asks an additional question: how does he transcend? How does he come to that platform? So Arjuna's questions about Gunatit. Lord is already Gunatit. He is already beyond the gunas. Arjuna is asking how an individual can become Gunatit, how one can transcend the modes, what are his symptoms, what is his behavior. So all these questions are being asked by Arjuna, and Krishna is very happy to answer.
Actually, Arjuna is just thinking like, I mean, can you imagine people with whom we are associating with? Maybe some of them are actually at that level who have transcended the modes. So Arjun wants to know, how do I recognize them? If I meet them, how do I recognize? What symptom do they exhibit or what behavior do they exhibit? How do I know them? So Krishna answers here.
And for others, somebody may be faking, somebody may speak. Like there are many people who will give classes on Bhagavad Gita, they will quote shlokas and it may appear that wow, what kind of knowledge they have. But then we have to look beyond that and see how much of it is in their practice. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prakasham cha pravrittim cha Moham eva cha Pandava Na dveshti samprapravantani Na nivrittani kankshati Udasin vadasino Gunairyo na vichalayate Gunavartanta iti evam Yogatishthati ningate.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu. So now Krishna is answering the first question as what is the symptom of such a person. So read carefully along with me. Krishna is describing the symptoms. He who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present or long for them when they disappear. So illumination actually is a symptom of mode of goodness. If we remember goodness, passion, and ignorance, which we have read in great detail in the last session. So Krishna mentions there that a person in mode of goodness, all the 9 gates are illuminated. So illumination is a symptom of goodness. Attachment is a symptom of passion. A passionate person actually works because he's attached to the fruits. He has such strong attachment. And delusion is a symptom of mode of ignorance. So he is saying, Krishna is saying that a person who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion, or goodness, passion, and ignorance when they are present, or long for them when they disappear. So either they are there or they are not there. This person is not disturbed by that. Who's unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of material quality. So he understands that all this goodness, passion, and ignorance are actually the material qualities. And he does not become disturbed, he does not become agitated by these modes, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active. So this person is actually, so this is the first symptom, that he is free from envy and hankering, because he understands that sometimes, like, there is a competition. So competition is coming from a mode of passion, or sometimes somebody does not like me, sometimes people get angry, sometimes somebody shouts at me, sometimes someone insults me. So he understands that it is all basically the modes interacting, because we are all living entities, spirit, soul, part and parcel of Krishna. So a soul, at the soul level, there is no problem. At the soul level, the soul understands that everybody is part and parcel of Krishna. So we don't fight at that level. Fighting or disagreement or problems or envy or hankering, all that happens at the level of modes. So this person understands that he is not the mode, and hence he neither hate anyone nor he desires for things. So he is completely situated in a transcendental position, because he does not get disturbed by the modes of material nature. And the further symptom is, so because of that, he is equipoised, he is transcendental and detached, knowing that the modes alone are active. So we discussed in verse number 19 that the knowledge which liberate. So what is that knowledge? What is the characteristic of that knowledge? That person understands that modes are active, and modes get us the body, and modes make us do action, and modes actually get attached to the goals. So it is all modes. So he understands that, and that he is separate from the modes. And because of that understanding, he does not get disturbed. He is equipoised, transcendental, and detached. Samadukha sukha svastha samaloshtashakanchanaha tulya priya priyo dhiras tulya nindatma samstutihi manapamanayo's tulyas tulyo mitrari pakshayoho sarvarambha parityagi gunatitah sa uchyate. Who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, and who is equal towards the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. So let's look at these things. These are the exhibition of his conduct. What are these exhibitions? That he regards happiness and distress alike. So probably a good idea would be to for us to visualize this would be to imagine a person who is incriminated, and he's in jail. But he has reformed himself. He understands he made a mistake, and he now has fixed his mind on getting out of the jail. So what happens is, even if he receives some happiness or some distress in jail, he becomes equipoised. He understands that he doesn't really have to interact with that. If somewhere he gets a very nice place to stay, somebody, or sometimes he gets into a cell which is very filthy, or sometimes he stays with a person who's very troublesome, or somebody who's not so troublesome, he just tolerates that.
whether whatever assets he gets or he loses, it doesn't really matter to him. So whether it's a earth or a stone or a piece of gold, he looks at everything with an equal eye, because his goal is to get out of this, miserable condition. He has to get out of the jail. So, and then who's equal towards the desirable and undesirable? So, as I was explaining, there may be some desirable situations may arise. The particular guard who is guarding his section on different shifts, they may be very friendly to him, very desirable, and then their shifts change. They're posted somewhere else, and somebody else, who's very rough, who comes very undesirable. But then he's equal to both, because he understands, this is all temporary. In few years, I have to just somehow or other, tolerate this and get out. Who's steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who's renounced all material activity. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. So this person, we see that how he is becoming more and more elevated. A person may feel that, okay, he may not have much attachment to the objects, whether it's a stone or gold. There are people who develop, who have some amount of detachment from them, but it becomes even more difficult when it comes to people. But this person has gradually become so advanced that he treats both his friend and even his enemy. He treats both of them alike. Of course, which means he respects both of them, and he has renounced all material activities. So this person has actually transcended the modes of nature. So this whole verses are describing his behavior, that he's steady in all situations, whether it's a praise or it's a blame. Now, if we were to evaluate how much are we free from modes, so this is a good slide, because our behavior. In fact, we can give these parameters to our friends or family member and ask them to rate, us on this, and then they will I'm sure they will, in a very impartial way, they may judge us, give us rating. Yeah, am I steady in praise and blame? Okay, maybe not. So most of us will find challenges in all these areas. How we behave when we are honored and how we behave when we are dishonored. How many times if we are blamed for something which I have not done, or even sometimes when I have done but I am blamed for it, how do I behave? What happens to me internally and externally when there is some praise for me, or there is a very happy situation or a distressful situation, or I get something which is very undesirable, maybe a health problem, or maybe a health problem to a loved one. How do I react in that situation? So this person who is gunatit, he is steady in all circumstances. He understands these are all interactions of the modes, and he is beyond them. His behavior is that he deals equally with every object, whether it is earth, stone, or gold. Every object also he deals equally. He deals with people also equally, whether friend or enemy, and that is how he remains equipoised in his behavior towards people. Mam chayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunat samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate.
So Arjun has asked the third question. So we have already discussed the symptoms, we discussed the behavior, and the third question is, how does he transcend the modes? So Krishna is answering that question here, how to surpass the modes. He says, one who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, avyabhicharina, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahma. So he is telling that when we are performing bhakti, which is without any deviation, and where there is no mixing of other yogas, like we have discussed Gyan Yoga, Karma Yoga, etc. So there is no mixture of that, and we are completely focused, and I am working only for the pleasure of Krishna. I am performing all the activities only as a service to Krishna. So engages in full devotional service, who serves Krishna only. So such a person is actually qualified to transcend the modes. So here we have a video. Just Here we have a video which we thought is very, very appropriate, who is actually the representation of this particular verse. So here we have a video about Srila Prabhupada, who's the founder Acharya of iskcon. So we'll just watch this video.
His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, was a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, and therefore his entire life, including his passing from this mortal world, was a perfect example of Krishna consciousness. This video depicts his final pastimes. During his last months in Vrindavan, His Divine Grace continued to instruct his disciples, discuss the affairs of iskcon, and translate Srimad Bhagavatam. On his request, his disciples maintained 24-hour kirtan and readings from the scriptures. Srila Prabhupada invited all his disciples to be with him as he passed the test we all must face. However, due to circumstances often beyond their control, most of his disciples were not present. Now, those who choose to can experience those precious moments. Although these scenes can be emotionally wrenching, they do depict a rare transcendental event, the last chapter in Srila Prabhupada's glorious life. The final lesson.
And it says, karma, karma hetu.
Karma hetu, if we engage in devotional service, we get a different nature. And if we engage in the business of sense gratification, we get all different.
And then that karma is tad dehopalabdhi hetu.
Yeah. And according to the association of different nature, we get a body. Karanam gunasammasya satasat janmayoni. Therefore, we should always seek good association, devotee association. Then our life will be successful.
And then last it says the gunas, satvadayo, jnana vikshepa moha hetavaha.
Then, if we live with good association, then we cultivate knowledge. That means association. And man is known by his company. So, if we have the chance of association with devotees, then our character, nature become different.
And here he is lying on the bed and dictating the purports to Srimad Bhagavatam. So that was his consciousness. So the external situation, his illness, his old age, nothing was an impediment in his performance of his devotional service. So his Guru Maharaj had given him this one instruction that he must translate the books in English language. And here he is dictating his purports. So the whole point is, this is how he is teaching by his own personal example as how can one transcend the modes. What is the method of transcending the modes? So first is engaging in devotional service of Krishna only. So here at the last moment also, he is not thinking of uh, anything else. He's just thinking of the Supreme Lord. And second is unfailing in any circumstance.
And that is why Srila Prabhupada is an acharya. He taught and he himself practiced and he demonstrated it. So this is a remarkable demonstration of his consciousness at a time, as Sugidhi was explaining, that he was very, very feeble, and he had to be carried around. So whenever there was a morning arati, darshan arati, or so he was taken for darshan of the deities, and devotees were on Prabhupada's request, the devotees were doing kirtan or they were reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. So all that was continuing 24 hours. So Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan. He wanted to depart from Vrindavan. So Prabhupada taught his disciples and then set an example for them that how perfection, what is perfection, actually Prabhupada showed it to all of us. So that is why he is an acharya, an exemplary devotee for all times to come. Brahmano hi pratisthaham amritasya vyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya cha. So this is also a very interesting verse where Krishna is saying Brahmano hi pratishtaham, a very, very important verse for those who were very attached to the impersonal Brahman, who are very attached to Brahma Jyoti. And Krishna is speaking here directly, a direct verse where he's saying Brahmano hi pratishtaham. I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. So people who are attached to Brahma Jyoti or impersonal Brahman, Krishna is saying, of that also I am the basis. So that's why this verse assumes so much of significance. Pratishtha means he's the shelter, which means the Brahma Jyoti exists in the first place. The foundation of Brahma Jyoti is the Supreme Lord. So this is what Lord is saying here, that Krishna is the source of Brahman. So when one attains the level of Brahman, which means freedom from the contamination of the modes of material nature, he becomes qualified to perform bhakti. So we understood, we saw in previous sessions that how the Lord, there are three levels of transcendental spiritual realization. The lowest level of realization is realizing the Brahma Jyoti. Next level of realization is realizing Paramatma. And the final or the most profound realization of God is Bhagavan realization. And here Krishna is making it very clear that the Brahma realization is subordinate to Bhagavan realization. The Brahma Jyoti is subordinate to even Paramatma. What to talk about? Bhagavan. So one has to come to this platform of Nirguna or beyond the modes, and then one can actually perform devotional service unto the transcendent Lord.
So with this we complete the chapter 14, and before we get into chapter 15, so chapter 14 we saw various aspects of the modes. We saw how to identify our mode, and we also saw what happens when a person die in a particular mode, and ultimately how to transcend the mode. So the verse number 26 of chapter 14 is a very, very important verse. It's a memory verse because there Krishna explains it. He spells it out, that how a person, unless he is full time completely engaged in devotional service of the Lord, he cannot transcend the modes. So bhakti yoga or devotional service is the one and only way to get out of the material world. So that is how he concludes that. And here is the next chapter talking about the yoga of the Supreme Person. So now we discussed about the bhakti yoga, and now the question may arise, what about the yoga? What about the Vedas? So Krishna is opening up this chapter. He will be describing about the purpose of the Vedic study. So the entire Vedic study is ultimately to understand Krishna and to come to a point where we are convinced of performing devotional service. So actually the whole purpose of Vedas is to inspire us to perform devotional service, but after understanding everything in their detailed perspective. So here we see that this chapter has total 20 verses, which is divided into 4 sections. The first section from verse number 1 to 6, reflection and substance.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhvamulam Adha Shakham Ashwatham Prahuravyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedaved. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upwards and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So Krishna is answering this question because many of us may want to know what is the origin of this world, what is the origin of this universe, what is the nature of this world. So Krishna is using a metaphor of a tree. Now what is happening to this tree? Krishna is explaining. So it's all a metaphor, a metaphor, an example through which we can understand that Krishna is saying that it appears as a imperishable banyan tree. But I'm sure all of us would have seen a banyan tree, and banyan tree, the roots are down and it grows upwards, and then there is the foliage or the branches and the leaves are there. But this tree, the material world, is being described as an upside down tree. So this is a pictorial or a drawing so that we can understand. So this is how somewhat the tree looks like. The base root is up. Let's look at the reflection. So the base root is up, the branches are going down, and the leaves are down. So the question is where such a tree is found. A tree is found. Now from here you can very easily understand that this tree is found not in reality but in reflection. So when there is a tree on the bank of a lake, which has a still water, then we can see the tree and we can also see the reflection of the tree. Similarly, the reality is in the spiritual world, and that spiritual world is reflected in the desire of the living entity to enjoy independently from God. So that reality is reflected in the material universe. So this is how the tree exists. This material will exist as an inverted tree. So this is where we see the original spiritual world, where we have Shri Radha, Shyam Sundar, and all his devotees. In fact, it is described in the scriptures that the spiritual world is much larger. It is Tripad Vibhuti. It is Tripad, whereas the material world is only Ekpad Vibhuti. So Tripad Vibhuti. So that is where the spiritual world is. That is where the reality is. That's where the Lord and his devotees are, and they are reflected in the desire, the mundane desire to enjoy independently from the Lord. So that is how the material world becomes manifest. So material world is an upside down banyan tree. So it is spiritual world's reflection on the mundane desire. So we see that there is the root. If we look at the tree, let's look at the blue part. That is the material world. So top of that tree is where the four-headed Brahmaji sits. So that is the Brahma Loka or Satya Loka, where the four-headed Brahma is there. That is from where the root of this material world starts. So the root is on the top. Brahma Loka is on the highest, in the highest position in this universe. And then as we come down, then we have the Devas, and then we have the Gandharvas, the Kinnaras. Interestingly, the Asura and the Rakshasas are also residing on planetary systems which are upper than the humans. So we have Asuras, Rakshasas, in fact, Pretas and Bhutas. So these are subtle entities which do not really have gross forms. So even they are residing on higher planetary systems compared to the earthly plane. Then we have the human earthly plane, and then we have the lower species. So this tree that is how it is organized. And then below the humans are the beasts like the cows, the horses. And then we further go down into lower species, that is the birds, the insects, and the worms, moth. And then beyond the insects are the immobile living entities like the trees and the plants. So this is how the general arrangement of this tree is. Uh, this tree is considered very, very good. Why? Because this tree is designed for people to enjoy. So this tree gives dharma, it gives the process of religion, that if you do these pious activities, what you will get? You will get artha, or you will get the resources. With that resources, you can satisfy your desires. So dharma, artha, kama. You perform pious activities, gain the resources, and then you enjoy life. And then if one gets some association from, becomes tired of this and tries to understand some truth beyond this cycle of dharma, artha, kama, then you understand there is something beyond this material world, is moksha. So this tree is considered very good because it gives one dharma, artha, kama. That's why they come in the material world in the first place. But that is there is another word, another meaning for this word called Ashvata. The word name Krishna has used, Ashvata, and Ashvata means temporary, which will not exist tomorrow, which means that this tree is bound to perish. So those who understand that this tree is very temporary, so devotees understand this, that this material, because they understand the essence of the Vedic knowledge. They understand Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, which gives the essence of Vedic knowledge, that this tree, it may appear immeasurable. It is expanding everywhere, huge. We do not even know till where it extends. But still, it is temporary. It is bound to perish. Of course, material world is created, maintained, and destroyed. So this cycle is there. Creation and destruction cycle is there. So they become completely detached from this. And then it is mentioned in the verse that the leaves of this tree are the Vedas. So actually, it refers to the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, which performs, okay, if you sacrifice a white horse in a particular direction according to this parameters, or this way, then you can attain great strength and great opulence and and happiness. So there are different types of sacrifice which are mentioned for progeny. Different sacrifices are mentioned. So the leaves, what makes a tree attractive? It is the nice, beautiful leaves that are part of the tree. So the Vedas, the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas, they make this tree very, very attractive. By looking at those leaves, person becomes say, yeah, this will satisfy my desires. So, but this is only the case with those people who do not understand the purpose of the Vedas. So, Vedas have Karma Kanda section, but Vedas also tell us about the spiritual world. They also tell us about the Supreme Lord. They also tell us the futility of being in this material world and trying to enjoy this material world, and how one should transcend. So all that information is there. Like in Bhagavad Gita, we get all types of knowledge, and we get the highest knowledge as well. So one can be free from entanglement within material world by cultivating a transcendental desire to enter into spiritual world. So this material world is almost, so many branches, so many leaves, so many planetary systems above, so many of them down, and we can continue going up and down, but then we can actually become free from this tree if we have a desire to serve the Lord and to enter into the spiritual world. Adharchodvam prashritastasya shakha guna pravadha vishaya pravala adarshamulani anushantatani karmanubandhini manushya loke.
So this verse, second verse of the same chapter 15, it further describes this metaphor. So this example what Krishna is giving, it is for our visualization so that we can understand what stands where. So he is further explaining this, that the branches of this tree extend downward and upward. So generally we have seen that the branches of tree goes up, but this tree, the branches are extending downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the object of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So there are different things which are mentioned. So now it is mentioned that the branches are there. Some branches are going upward and some are going downward. So the downward branches represent the lower species of life, like the animals and others. So those are the lower species of life. Upward being the devatas and the elevated beings. So actually, as we understand that this world, there are 14 planetary system, the entire material world is divided into different planets, and there are earth comes in the bit in the center. There are planets above and below earth. So this is what is a description of these branches going upward and downward, and how these branches are nourished. So the nourishment is provided by the gunas. So just like how we water the plant and the plant becomes strong, so similarly the more we are controlled by the gunas, the more this tree is nourished. And then the twigs are the object of senses. So basically, the purpose of this whole tree is for sense enjoyment. So we are there on this tree because we want to enjoy, and we enjoy and we get some fruitive action. So we do an action, we get a reaction, we do another action, we get another reaction. So that is how one is bound to this world, this tree. So these are the part of the tree which is mentioned. The material world is a tree nourished by three modes and fruitive acts. So this is the example which Krishna is explaining in the first two verses about the tree which is upside down and the roots going up and the branches up and down, the higher branches and lower branches representing the better planets and the difficult planets or the different species of life. So branches spreading up and down, planets with different species, watering process by three modes. Twigs are the sense objects like sound. So different sense objects, and secondary root extending all over, which are the fruitive action. So because of this fruitive action, one is bound to this ashwat or a illusionary tree or a temporary tree. So this tree is there, but this tree is not real that way, because whatever we desire, we are stuck on this tree and there seems to be no escape.
So this point that secondary roots are extending everywhere, it is, for example, we live our life, some of our desires get fulfilled, and based on those desires that are fulfilled, we develop more desires. And when would we fulfill those desires? By getting another body. So because we have so many unfulfilled desires which are triggered by our current actions and current fulfillment of desires, so that is how the secondary roots will come. Now, usually Ashwatha tree will have the main root only, main trunk and root. But here secondary roots are coming because of this. So this tree is expanding and extending everywhere. Narupam asyeha tatopalabhyate nanto nachadir nachasam pratishtha ashvatam menam suvirudhamulam asangashastrena dradena chitva tatapadam tat parimargitavyam yasmin gatana nivartanti bhuyah tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yatah pravritti prarasta purani. So here Krishna is giving Shastra, the fourth line, that asanga shastrena, rena chitva. So Krishna is talking about cut the tree, and for that he is telling what is the weapon, the shastra. What is the shastra? Asanga, or detachment. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, and where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So very interesting. So the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, and where its foundation is. And that is actually a fact. Why? It cannot be perceived because so many people, as many opinions about the origin of this world, where it came from, what is happening, whether it is real or is it false, is it eternal or is it temporary. So many people have so many views and opinions about this. So it is very, very difficult for people to actually perceive it in reality. So for a common point of view, for a common man, he's so much busy in his life, he does not even, for him this world is an eternal world, because from the time he is born till the time he dies, sun keeps rising from east, sun keeps setting on in the west. So for him it is like that. And why all this is happening? Because he lacks proper real knowledge. He does not have that knowledge with him with which he can analyze his material world. Although sun rises from the east, it has been doing so for millions of years, but then this material world nonetheless is temporary manifestation. So what is Krishna saying? But with determination one must cut this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So there is only one weapon, there's only one weapon which can cut this tree, in which we are jumping from one branch to another, from one root to another. There is only one weapon, and that weapon is the weapon of detachment. When the moment if we actually, somebody just gives a normal reading to Bhagavad Gita, also one understands that this material world is dukhalayam. So he understands this tree is a tree of suffering, and therefore I must detach myself from this tree, and that is the weapon. So weapon of detachment with which one has to cut this tree. And then Krishna in this verse, in the 4th verse, setting the goal also, that you cut this tree and go to a place from which you don't have to come ever again. Only one-way traffic. You go and you don't have to return, and there surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that one understands that I'm not the only one. We have the Supreme Lord, and He is so loving, the most loving person actually. And we have an eternal relationship with such a person. And all I have to do is just revive that relationship. And once that relationship is revived, I can go back and I don't have to come ever again. So what is the process of this search? How do we search this out? Krishna has given this, that surrender, which is the beginning of devotional service. So the tree, real or illusion? So is this tree real? No, it is a reflection of the real tree. So the real realities in the spiritual world, this material world is a reflection of that reality. Why is it reflection? So although matter is real, but like this body is made up of matter. The unreal part is that I understand that I am this body. So that is how it is not real. It is only, it is an illusion that I live in. And how do we cut this tree? That tree is cut with the weapon of detachment. It has to be cut with determination. Desired destination is the spiritual world. Go beyond this material world and to the spiritual. So this is the example that Krishna has given here, so that we can understand the position of this material world, the position of the living entity, and the goal setting of the living entity.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we will stop here because there is a lot of intense information which we have shared. So we will not bombard you with more verses. So we will stop here. Reading assignment for next week is from verse number 5 to 12. And also, please log into Study Gita website and complete the quiz for chapter number 14. The quiz has been uploaded. It's up there. So we have completed chapter 14. So please do it. And in the next session, we will continue with.
And tomorrow is Rath Yatra festival at iskcon Chennai. So if you are in Chennai, please, we request you to come and visit the Rath Yatra, participate in Rath Yatra, pull the Lord. There is a benediction that if we pull the Lord, we see the Lord on the chariot. Actually, just by having darshan of the Lord on the chariot, there is no rebirth. So we request you to come and participate in the festival. We'll be sharing the route details with you.
We have
And
already shared.
we have already shared the route details with you. In case you're not in Chennai and you're in some other part of in some other city of India or anywhere else in the world, check with your local center. Especially in India, all the Rath Yatras in India of iskcon will happen between 2nd of July and 9th of July. So please check with your local center and do participate in the most amazing of all festivals, this Rath Yatra festival.
Hare Krishna.
Krishna.